For the first time since Nurgle healed him, Kalen felt mortal again. The silence deepened until it was suffocating. Then, slowly, the world around him began to animate. The smooth surface beneath him ruptured like unstretched skin. Shapes pushed upward from beneath the ground, arms, heads, torsos, yet they weren't undead. They weren't diseased. They weren't corrupted. They were perfect. Perfect faces without wounds. Perfect bodies without scars. Perfect forms without blemishes. Each creature that emerged looked like a human sculpted from untouched flesh, too smooth, too symmetrical, too flawless to be real. Their eyes had no pupils. Their skin had no pores. Their expressions had no soul. They surrounded him like statues. And then they all inhaled at once. A single, unified breath. A sound that chilled Kalen deeper than any plague ever had. Then they spoke, not with mouths, not with voices, but through his own bloodstream, vibrating inside his bones. You do not belong here. Kalen staggered back. Who are you? The figures stepped closer with movements too clean, too precise. We are the uncorrupted. We are the untouched. We are the failure. His heart locked. Failure. You resist his touch, they continued. You defy his gifts. You carry his blessings, but you remain yourself. You were healed, but not broken. Restored, but not surrendered. They leaned in. You are an incomplete offering. Kalen's breath caught. Incomplete, because he still had a will. Because he still had a name. Because he wasn't entirely remade in Nurgle's image. He tried to back away, but the sterile creatures closed in like a tightening ring. The garden offers harmony. You remain discord. Then the ground trembled beneath him, once, twice, before bursting open in a violent rupture of light. Something colossal was rising, something ancient, something that had been watching since the moment he entered the circle. And when Kalen finally saw the shape emerging from below, his blood ran cold, because this time, he wasn't being healed, he was being judged. Because when the colossal shape finally rose from beneath the sterile ground, Kalen realized he was looking at himself. Not a clone, not a doppelganger, not an illusion, but a version of himself that had never been touched by plague, poison, or war. A version without scars, without struggle, without the grit of surviving one catastrophe after another. A perfectly symmetrical, perfectly healthy, perfectly empty imitation. A false Kalen. It towered over him, its skin unblemished and smooth like polished bone, its eyes empty discs of white light. It looked like a man sculpted by someone who had never seen a real human, only the idea of one. The flawless figures around him bowed their heads toward it in silent reverence. Kalen's throat tightened. What are you? The imitation didn't speak with words. Instead, its voice vibrated inside Kalen's skull, uncomfortably clean and precise. I am what you were supposed to become. The sterile ground pulsed beneath Kalen's feet as though recognizing its true master. The imitation took a single step forward, and the air warped around it, perfect, surgical, cold. Kalen felt his own corrupted strength draining faster. I wasn't supposed to be a monster, he growled, clenching his fists. The imitation tilted its smooth head. You misunderstand. You were not supposed to be anything at all. The flawless figures echoed the words like a choir of hollow voices. Kalen froze. Not supposed to be anything. The false Kalen continued. Nurgle healed you, but he did not break you. He did not remake you fully. You cling to will, to identity, to purpose. The imitation pointed at him, movement so precise it felt inhuman. You resist his harmony. Kalen felt a sickening understanding settle into his bones. It wasn't that he had been healed too much. It was that he had been healed incorrectly. A blessing without full corruption. A restoration without surrender. An anomaly. A mistake. So what? Kalen spat. You're here to fix me. The imitation's smooth face split, not into a smile, but into an impossibly straight line that suggested the idea of one. I am here to replace you. The sterile figures stepped closer, forming a ring. The ground sealed behind them. The air turned sharp as knives. A replacement. A perfect servant of Nurgle, obedient, empty, complete. Something he could never be. Kaelin's pulse quickened. You think you can just erase. But the false Kaelin moved. It didn't lunge. It didn't strike. It didn't attack. It simply touched him. And Kaelin screamed. His plague blessings recoiled like animals cornered by fire. His bones vibrated with sterile energy that stripped rot, infection, and corruption from his cells with surgical brutality. His skin blistered, not from disease, but from the absence of it, the violent removal of Nurgle's touch. The perfection spread across his arm like molten purity, erasing every scar, every healed mark, every sign of the blessing. Kaelin ripped free with a shout, stumbling back, panting. His arm was flawless, smooth, lifeless, not healed, sterilized. It didn't feel like flesh. It didn't feel like his. The imitation stepped toward him again, unwavering. You were given a gift. You misused it. You clung to your independence. You clung to yourself. The ground shook. The sterile circle began to constrict like a tightening cage. Now you will be rewritten. Kaelin clenched his fists, fury burning through the growing weakness in his veins. He had survived plague worlds, warp storms, demonic curses, and the long, slow torment of being healed too much. He wasn't about to die to a perfect mannequin version of himself. Come on then, he growled. Let's see if perfection can bleed. The imitation's empty eyes flared, and the garden prepared to witness a battle between what Kaelin was and what he was never meant to be. Because that's what Kaelin stood against now. Not a monster, not a demon, not a corruption of Nurgle's will, but the terrifying perfection of what he was never meant to be. The circle of sterile ground pulsed with cold light as the imitation stepped forward, each movement impossibly smooth, like reality bent around it to avoid friction. The flawless figures surrounding Kaelin watched with emotionless reverence, as though observing a ritual that had been destined since the moment he set foot in the garden. The false Kaelin moved again, fast, faster than any human had a right to be. It was speed without hesitation, strength without strain, precision without instinct. Everything about it was calculated, as though it didn't fight, but executed commands. Kaelin barely dodged the next strike. The air split where the imitation's hand passed, the sterile energy shearing through the space he had occupied a second earlier. The impact made no sound. No shockwave. No heat. Just absence. A slice of existence removed cleanly, surgically. Kaelin gritted his teeth. This wasn't a fight. This was a purge. The imitation advanced relentlessly, each step erasing traces of the garden's rot, replacing it with dead purity. Kaelin swung back, his fist connecting with the false Kaelin's face. And instantly regretted it. It felt like punching polished stone. No give, no recoil, no life. A crack ran up his knuckles. Pain shot through his wrist. The imitation didn't even blink. It responded with a single finger pressed against his chest. Kaelin was launched backward like he had been struck by a tank shell. He hit the sterile ground hard. Breath ripped from his lungs. His vision blurred. And underneath the pain, something worse. The sterilization spread where the imitation had touched him, cold, smooth, perfect. A patch of skin wiped clean of history, stripped of all the surviving marks that proved he had lived. He staggered up, fury burning hot in his veins. You think that makes you better? He shouted, voice ragged. You think being a clean slate makes you stronger? The imitation tilted its head slightly, an expressionless gesture of curiosity, or perhaps analysis. Strength is obedience. Purpose is surrender. Identity is inefficiency. Kaelin spat blood. Identity is power. With a roar, he lunged forward again. This time, he didn't aim to strike. He aimed to grab, to force the imitation into a form of combat it couldn't simply sterilize away. The imitation countered instantly. But Kaelin wasn't fighting alone. His body, corrupted and healed and reshaped by Nurgle in a way even the garden couldn't fully understand, rebelled against the sterile energy. Plague-born endurance flooded him. His veins pulsed with unnatural resilience. His bones thickened, hardened. Something deep inside him, the part Nurgle had touched too much, began stirring. He avoided the imitation's perfect strike and slammed his shoulder into its chest. This time, there was resistance. The false Kalen slid back a fraction of an inch, sterile ground cracking beneath its heel for the first time. A gasp rippled through the flawless watchers. They weren't used to seeing imperfection win. The imitation's faceless mask shifted, not quite confusion, not quite recognition, something in between. Kalen stepped forward, breathing heavily, sweat and corrupted fluids dripping from his skin. "You're fast, you're strong, but you're missing something important," he growled. The imitation silently awaited the inefficient human's conclusion. Kalen clenched his fists. "You don't know what it means to fight for your own existence." For the first time, the sterile creature drew back, not physically, but in some intangible way, as though evaluating something it had never been forced to consider. Kalen charged again. The imitation met him. Their impact sent a shock through the sterile ground, cracking the perfect surface like breaking glass. The flawless figures surrounding the ring recoiled instinctively, their perfectly synchronized formation disrupted. Kalen wrapped his arms around the false Kalen's frame, forcing it into a grapple. It struggled, not with emotion, but with mechanical determination. Its limbs moved in clean, efficient arcs designed to dismantle human anatomy. But Kalen wasn't relying on anatomy anymore. He relied on everything the garden hated. Scarred tissue, warp-touched sinew, rot-born endurance, instinct sharpened by survival, strength grown from suffering. The more the imitation tried to sterilize him, the stronger the corrupted parts of him pushed back, mutating, resisting, adapting. Their bodies strained, the ground cracked, the sterile circle trembled, and slowly, inch by inch, the imitation's perfect shell began to fissure. A single crack split its smooth, flawless face. The flawless watchers froze. Kalen didn't stop. He shoved harder. His corrupted muscles tore and regrew in the same moment. His bones cracked and knit under the pressure. His nerves burned with sterile agony and blossomed with plague-born resistance. The imitation's face split wider. Light poured out, white, searing, unnatural. The sterile ground wailed like metal tearing. Kalen roared through the pain. And then, the imitation screamed. A perfect being wasn't supposed to feel fear. But it did. Because for the first time, it was breaking. And Kalen was the one breaking it. The sterile garden shook violently. Reacting to the impossible, Kalen pushed with everything he had. And the perfect creature shattered like glass. The sterile ground exploded outward in a silent burst of white light. The flawless watchers collapsed into dust. The circle ruptured. The infection returned. And Kalen fell to his knees, gasping, shaking, alive. But he didn't feel relieved. Because something ancient, something immense, something watching, had finally taken notice of him. He had fought. He had resisted. He had shattered the imitation of himself that was meant to replace him. And yet the warmth, the ever-present, soft, insidious warmth, still pulsed beneath his skin. It hummed with satisfaction, like a predator pleased with a successful hunt, but far gentler, almost nurturing. Hale could feel it weaving through every nerve, twisting into his marrow, reminding him that no matter how far he resisted, the garden had invested in him. The healing he had received, the gifts of endurance, regeneration, and strength, these were not free. They never were, and the cost was rising. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. His body didn't just heal wounds anymore, it grew. Muscles thickened, veins bulged unnaturally beneath the surface, bones lengthened imperceptibly. When he flexed, there was a faint ripple of unnatural energy beneath his skin. Bruises no longer appeared, but faint discolorations pulsed across his flesh like tiny living warnings. Hale recognized these changes for what they were, the side effects of healing taken too far. The more the plague god touched him, the less he resembled the man he had been. But worse than the physical changes was the feeling. The whispers had grown louder now, threading through his thoughts like a second heartbeat. They praised him. They coaxed him. They reminded him constantly that he was chosen, blessed, loved. And the voice, soft, fatherly, patient, never stopped. He found himself listening, unconsciously, craving it, leaning into it, allowing it to soothe the anxieties that had once kept him alive. Every time he resisted, it would hum insistently, not with anger, but with the warmth of gentle disappointment. "You are mine," it whispered one night, as Hale lay on the cold stone of the garden floor. "Every cell, every breath, every thought, mine. You belong. You always belonged." Hale felt a shiver run through him, not from cold, but from the creeping understanding that he had traded freedom for survival. The more he accepted the healing, the more he became entwined with the will that delivered it. And it was only the beginning. The next morning, he discovered that the healing no longer targeted wounds. It began altering him in ways deeper, stranger, more permanent. His sight sharpened unnaturally. Colors were more vivid, the air shimmered with movement that normal eyes could not detect. Every sense was enhanced, every reflex accelerated. Every touch carried awareness of decay and vitality simultaneously. He could feel the life force in plants, in the soil, in insects scuttling beneath his boots. It should have been amazing. But it terrified him, because this was not just healing. This was transformation, and every transformation demanded a price. Hale understood now that Nurgle's healing had gone beyond restoring him. It was rewriting him, merging him with something older, more patient, and infinitely more dangerous than the battlefield, the plague, or even death itself. His body had been given gifts no mortal should bear, but those gifts were leashed to a will he could not escape. He could fight, resist, rage, even destroy the imitation of himself, but the core of his being, the warmth that pulsed beneath his skin, remained tethered to Nurgle. It had grown roots, and roots are hard to pull out. Hale stumbled to his feet, shaking. The sterile echo of the garden still lingered in his mind, even after shattering the imitation. The whispers circled him, caressing his thoughts, reminding him that every heartbeat, every breath, every twitch of muscle was under constant observation. He clenched his fists. He could feel the strength, the endurance, the impossible vitality that the healing had granted him. He could feel the power to survive anything. And he realized the ultimate truth: survival was no longer a gift. It was a chain. And chains, no matter how soft, are still chains. Hale's breath came fast. He understood, with a clarity that made his bones ache, that his struggle was only beginning. The garden had not finished with him. The blessing had a cost, and the price would be paid in body, mind, and soul. Because healing, in Nurgle's hand, is never free. He was alive, more alive than any human had the right to be. Every cell in his body throbbed with vitality. Wounds could no longer touch him. Disease could not touch him. Pain could not touch him. The battlefield, the plague, even death itself had failed to claim him. He was perfection in motion, and yet, he was nothing like the man he had been. The warmth, the constant, whispering presence of Nurgle's blessing, pulsed beneath his skin like an eternal heartbeat. It was no longer comforting. It was demanding. Every thought, every action, every impulse was being subtly reshaped. Hale realized that what he had thought of as healing, as protection, as love, had never been optional. It had been a leash, invisible and unbreakable, tethering him to a force far older and far more patient than himself. He looked at his hands. Flawless, smooth, strong, trembling. He flexed them and felt the power to heal, to destroy, to endure. And in the reflection of those hands, he saw the truth staring back at him. He was both the miracle and the prisoner of the miracle. Every gift carried its shadow. Every blessing came with a chain. Every heartbeat that the warmth allowed him to survive was also a heartbeat enslaved to a will he could never defy. For a moment, Hale wanted to scream, to rage, to tear himself free from the invisible bonds. But even the thought of defiance brought a pang of longing for the very comfort that imprisoned him. The warmth whispered, "I am proud of you. I have chosen you. You belong to me." And in that whisper was a serenity so seductive it made resisting feel impossible. The garden had not just healed him. It had claimed him. Not with chains, not with blades, not with fire, but with the slow, inexorable patience of life restored too fully, too completely, too perfectly. Hale was immortal in body, but in spirit, he was already Nurgle's. He understood now that survival in Nurgle's hand was a paradox. The more you are given, the less you remain yourself. The more he thrived, the more he belonged to the one who had healed him. The gift of being, too much healed, was eternal, and eternal was binding. Hale exhaled slowly, feeling the warmth flow through him, pulsing with quiet triumph. There was no anger left, no panic. Only understanding. The garden had won. Nurgle had won. And in the quiet, patient voice that resonated in his blood and marrow, he heard the ultimate promise. You will never die. But you will never be free. Severin Hale, the man who had survived plague, war, and impossible odds, closed his eyes. He could fight no longer, and perhaps he didn't need to. The warmth had won, the garden had claimed him, and the miracle that had saved him had become the prison that held him. And in that final moment of clarity, he smiled. Because in the 41st millennium, survival is never simple. Because in the 41st millennium, a blessing can be a curse. Because in the 41st millennium, Nurgle's love is eternal. The question drifts through the darkness like a whisper carried on the breath of something ancient, something patient, something impossibly gentle in its cruelty. It is the kind of question that crawls beneath the skin and settles there, just behind the heartbeat, waiting to bloom into dread. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, where the galaxy drowns in endless war, miracles are rare, and the ones that do appear are almost never free. Especially when they come wrapped in warmth, comfort, and promises of healing that feel too perfect, too complete, too absolute to be natural. Severin Hale never asked for a miracle. He barely believed in them. He was a simple guardsman, one of billions, a man whose life was supposed to be short, brutal, and forgotten by history. His purpose was to survive long enough to serve the Imperium with whatever broken scraps of strength remained in him. Yet there were moments, fleeting, fragile moments, when he prayed anyway. Not to the Emperor, but to anyone, anything, any force in the universe willing to give him one more breath. And on the night everything changed, someone, or something, answered. It began after the plague swept through his regiment. A sickness so vicious it tore through flesh like acid and left the dying gasping for help that never came. Hale should have been among them. He remembers the fever, the darkness closing in, the desperate final thought that he did not want to die alone in the mud. And then, nothing. No pain, no weakness, only warmth. As if gentle hands had lifted him up and wrapped him in the softest, most comforting embrace he had ever known. When he opened his eyes, the disease was gone. Every wound he had suffered was sealed. His strength had returned tenfold. It was a miracle, a blessing, a gift, or so he believed. Word spread quickly across the ranks. A man no one expected to survive had risen from near death with the vitality of someone reborn. The decay could not explain it. They whispered theories, misdiagnosis, mutation, latent resistance, but none of them held up under scrutiny. Hale should have been dead. Instead, he stood taller, breathed deeper, and felt a strange energy humming beneath his skin, as though life itself were coursing through him in thick, luxurious waves. At first, he cherished it. Who wouldn't? He felt stronger, faster, sharper. A part of him, the part battered by months of misery, dared to believe the universe had finally shown him mercy. But mercy in the 41st millennium is an illusion, a mask worn by darker things. It started small. A cut across his palm sealed itself within seconds, knitting together with absurd speed. A bruise from a training drill faded before his eyes, yellow to green to normal flesh in the span of a breath. Pain became something distant, almost theoretical, something he remembered rather than felt. Each time he expected a sting, a burn, a throb, there was nothing. Only that same comforting warmth flowing through him, soothing away anything that dared to harm him. At first, he laughed it off. Lucky, he said. Stubborn. Too damn tough to die. But beneath his laughter, a sliver of unease grew. He began dreaming of gardens, lush, sprawling places filled with impossible flowers and trees whose bark pulsed faintly like living skin. He dreamed of distant voices calling him by name, speaking with affection so pure it felt suffocating. The dreams felt real, too real. When he woke, the scent of moss and damp earth lingered in the air around him, clinging to his uniform, his hair, his skin. His squadmates noticed. They joked at first, but their eyes held fear they did not speak aloud. The priests noticed too. They stopped near him during blessings and frowned as though sensing something they could not name. One of them, a frail old missionary with trembling hands, touched Hale's shoulder during a routine litany, and recoiled as though he had been burned. He muttered a prayer under his breath and avoided Hale for the rest of the day. Still, Hale convinced himself nothing was wrong. Everything felt right. Better than right. He felt alive for the first time in years, like someone had polished the world around him and made every color brighter, every breath sweeter. He told himself he was lucky, chosen, blessed. But blessings do not whisper to you in your sleep. Miracles do not grow roots inside your veins. And healing, true healing, does not come with the sense that someone is watching you with endless, smothering affection. The first section ends with Hale standing at the edge of realization, too hopeful to see the truth, too healed to notice the trap closing around him, too alive to recognize the hand caressing his soul from the shadows. Because the plague god heals with love. And Nurgle's love is eternal. It's a strange kind of terror, that unsettling confusion where every improvement feels like a blessing, but every blessing carries a shadow. And if you stay with this story until the end, you'll uncover a truth most people in the Imperium never learn. The kind of healing Nurgle gives doesn't just save you, it owns you. That reward, understanding the final, horrifying twist in Severin Hale's fate, is waiting for you if you stay with me all the way to the end. For now, let's return to the moment Hale first realized something in him had shifted beyond anything the decay could explain. The changes were small at first, almost laughably harmless. A torn sleeve catching on metal and shredding the skin beneath, only for the wound to close up before a single drop of blood could fall. A twisted ankle during a training drill that straightened itself mid-step, leaving Hale confused, blinking at his own body as if it had disobeyed the laws of flesh. These were things he tried to shrug off, a lucky moment, a miracle of adrenaline, a fluke. But flukes don't keep happening. And miracles don't ask to be noticed. The warmth inside him grew stronger each day, pulsing steadily like an extra heartbeat hiding beneath his ribs. It wasn't painful. It wasn't even unpleasant. It felt like comfort. Deep, suffocating comfort. Like sinking into warm water and never wanting to climb back out. Hale tried telling himself it was normal, that surviving the plague had awakened something dormant in him. But the truth curled around him in moments when he least expected it. When he closed his eyes to sleep, he no longer saw darkness. He saw gardens. Vast gardens full of rotting vines and blooming spores. Places where decay lived side by side with beauty, where every dying leaf was replaced by 10 more bursting with foul, vibrant life. And always, always, there were voices. Not threatening, not cruel, but soft and affectionate, cooing to him like a child who needed comfort. Whispering that he was safe. Whispering that they were proud of him. Whispering that more gifts were coming soon. Hale tried to ignore it. He tried to pretend it was only dreams, only exhaustion. But his squadmates saw the changes too. They watched his cuts vanish instantly. They watched bruises disappear the moment they formed. They saw Hale walk through training drills without flinching, without gasping, without slowing, because pain no longer recognized him. And the way they looked at him began to shift. Not admiration, not confusion, fear. But the most disturbing part came one night when Hale accidentally sliced his forearm on a jagged metal locker. The skin peeled open, muscle and fat glistened beneath the torn surface, and in the span of a single breath, it sealed shut. Seamlessly, smoothly, as if the wound had never existed. Hale stared at the untouched skin in horror, waiting for shock or panic to rise, but instead, all he felt was an overwhelming sense of comfort. A warmth spreading up his arm, whispering reassurance. And deep inside that warmth, something stirred, something patient, something ancient, something loving in a way no human could ever understand. Hale looked at his arm, then at his reflection, and for the first time, he wondered if the miracle that saved his life was starting to rewrite it. Because healing is good, until it starts healing things you didn't know were broken. That was the question clawing at the back of Hale's mind as the days crept forward with an unsettling, unnatural smoothness, days in which he began to realize that his flesh no longer behaved like mortal flesh. He used to fear every bullet, every explosion, every jagged piece of shrapnel the battlefield could throw at him. Now, he feared none of it. He feared himself. The next change came during a routine patrol, far from the eyes of decay or priests. The squad was moving through a collapsed manufactorum when a hidden pressure mine detonated beneath Hale's feet. The explosion threw him like a ragdoll, slamming him against rusted machinery with a crunch that echoed through the rubble. His squad mates shouted, certain his spine had shattered, certain he was dead, but Hale stood back up. Not slowly, not painfully. He rose, as fluidly as if he'd simply slipped and needed to catch his balance. For a moment, everything was silent. No one knew what to say. Not even Hale. He felt the warmth rushing through him like liquid sunlight, knitting bone, repairing torn muscle, forcing his shattered body back into shape with the gentle insistence of a parent tidying up a child who'd scraped their knee. He knew that he should have been paralyzed. Instead, he rolled his shoulders, testing them experimentally, and felt nothing but that same comforting hum. One of the guardsmen swore under his breath. Another whispered a prayer of fear, not faith. Hale tried to laugh it off again, but the sound caught in his throat. Not because he felt pain, because he realized he wanted to laugh. Something in him was delighted by the way his body pulled itself together. Something inside him reacted with pride, like a gardener admiring a fresh bloom. The warmth pulsed, once, twice, like a heart that wasn't his. That night, Hale couldn't sleep. His muscles twitched, repairing themselves even though nothing was wrong. His skin itched with the sensation of cells dividing, replacing, rebuilding. Every part of him was too alive, brimming with vitality that had no place in a human body. When he blinked, he saw flashes of the same rotting garden from his dreams, petals of mold-flecked flowers opening and closing in slow, wet motions. Rest, a voice murmured from somewhere deep inside him, as gentle as a lullaby. But Hale didn't rest. He paced the barracks instead, watching the way his shadow stretched unnaturally along the floor, as if it had grown heavier than the light around it. Something was blossoming inside him, an infection of life, a sickness of renewal. The next morning, it got worse. During weapons drills, Hale burned his palm on overheated metal. The skin sizzled for a brief moment, then smoothed over instantly, leaving not even a scar. His squad mates watched this with widening eyes. One dropped his last gun, another stepped backward, as if Hale were a grenade about to detonate. And then came the real fracture between him and the rest of the platoon. When Hale accidentally sliced his thigh on a protruding metal shard, the wound didn't just close, it spat the shard out. His body rejected the injury, pushing the metal back out as if the flesh itself had developed a mind, a will, a preference. Like it knew what it wanted. Like it knew what it belonged to. The priests refused to go near Hale afterward. Even the commissar watched him more closely, his gaze sharp with suspicion. Rumors spread in hushed whispers, that Hale had been blessed, that he had been cursed, that he had been marked by something older than the Imperium. Yet through all the fear, all the changes, all the whispers, one truth sunk deeper into Hale's heart. He felt good. Too good. Unnaturally good. And deep down, in a place he was afraid to touch, he wondered if he even wanted the changes to stop. Because the warmth was no longer just healing him. It was comforting him, praising him, loving him, and whatever loved him, was getting closer. It doesn't sweep in with fanfare. It doesn't roar or tear or break its way into your soul. No, the most dangerous corruption arrives softly. It feels warm, gentle, comforting. It feels like help. And by the time you realize it's not helping you, it's already too late to pry its fingers out of your mind. For Severin Hale, the corruption did not begin with rot. It began with joy. The first time he noticed it, he had just survived a firefight that should have killed him. A chaos cultist's blade tore through his abdomen, a deep, ugly wound that would have disemboweled any normal man. Hale felt the blade punch into him, felt the wet heat of blood spill down his torso, felt the cold grip of death tighten around his spine. And then the warmth surged. It rippled outward from the wound like a gentle wave, closing flesh, stitching muscle, erasing pain as if the injury had never existed. Hale gasped, not in agony, but in relief so intoxicating it nearly made him fall to his knees. A flood of bliss washed through him, sweet and cloying, seeping into every thought. He exhaled slowly, savoring it, savoring the feeling of being whole, better than whole. Then came the laughter. Not his squadmates, not the cultists, his own. A low, breathless chuckle escaped him, bubbling up like something he'd been holding back for years. He should have been terrified. He should have been vomiting from shock. Instead, he felt alive, vibrant, euphoric, as if every cell in his body was singing. He didn't notice the way the cultist stared at him in horror. He didn't see his squadmates recoil. He didn't hear the missionary screaming prayers behind him. All he felt was the warmth. That gentle, fatherly warmth. Praising him, encouraging him, rewarding him. It was the first time Hale felt joy during battle, and it wouldn't be the last. From that moment onward, the emotions Hale had once relied on, fear, caution, hesitation, began to erode like sand beneath a rising tide. Instead of flinching from danger, he leaned toward it. Instead of fearing pain, he anticipated the moment the warmth would rush in and wipe it away. His body began to crave that comfort the way a starving man craves food. And the more he leaned into it, the more changes took root. He started smiling more, not wide, not obviously, but with small, unreadable smirks that unsettled everyone around him. His eyes lingered on wounds, his own and others, a little too long. He stopped asking for Medicaid treatment, because he didn't need it. He stopped registering risk, stopped thinking like a soldier, stopped reacting like someone who wanted to survive. He wasn't reckless, he was fearless. And fearlessness, in the 41st millennium, is rarely a gift. At night, he felt the warmth inside him pulse like a heartbeat that didn't belong to him. It soothed him when he was anxious. It whispered to him when he felt doubt. It stroked his mind with soft, rotting fingers and told him he was special, chosen, cherished. He found himself wanting to hear the whispers, wanting to feel the pulse, wanting the warmth to fill every part of him. But as Hale grew more attached to the comfort blooming inside him, everyone else grew more afraid. His squadmates stopped sitting near him, stopped speaking casually around him, stopped looking him in the eye. They feared the way he healed. They feared the way he laughed. They feared the way he changed. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being treated like a weapon no one wants to touch. Hale felt it pressing down on him, cold and heavy. But every time that loneliness clawed at him, the warmth rose, the whispers soothed him, that other heartbeat drummed stronger. You're not alone, it told him. You'll never be alone again. You're my child, my gift, my beloved. The emotional corrosion was complete long before Hale realized anything was wrong. Because his fear was gone. His doubt was gone. His pain was gone. And without those anchors, his humanity had begun to crumble. The plague god hadn't touched his flesh first. He touched Hale's heart, and Hale welcomed every moment of it. That was the unspoken question hanging over every interaction around Severin Hale. People didn't avoid him anymore, they watched him, studied him, whispered his name with tones normally reserved for cursed objects or unexploded ordnance. And the more they watched, the more Hale felt their fear feeding something warm and pleased inside his chest. The commissar was the first to act. It began subtly. Hale noticed additional inspections, unnecessary questions, lingering gazes that felt like someone scraping a knife against the inside of his skull. The commissar would approach him during drills, arms folded behind his back, his boots clicking like execution bells against the concrete. "Hale," he would say, voice clipped, controlled. "Any pain, any fatigue, anything unusual?" Hale always answered the same way. "No, sir, I feel fine." It was the truth. Too fine. The commissar's eyes narrowed each time, searching for signs of deception. But Hale never wavered, never stuttered, never hesitated. The warmth inside him gave him confidence, smoothing over every ripple of anxiety, whispering reassurance. "They don't understand you. They fear you. But I don't. I love you." The whispers felt like encouragement from a parent, soft, patient, endlessly affectionate. Too affectionate. But the commissar wasn't the only one watching. The regiment's missionary, the same trembling old priest who once recoiled from Hale's touch, began avoiding him altogether. Whenever Hale approached, the priest would stiffen, clutch his sacred texts as if they were shields, and mutter frantic litanies beneath his breath. Hale couldn't hear the words, but he recognized the cadence, prayers of exorcism. Wardings, pleas for divine protection. Hale didn't blame him. He would have prayed too, if he still knew how. But the true shift came from his squadmates, the men who had once laughed with him, fought beside him, shared rations and misery and fear. Now, they treated him like an unexploded mine. Conversation died when he walked into a room. Eyes flicked away. Jokes stopped. Even the bravest among them found excuses to stand a little farther back, to avoid brushing against him. Hale felt their distance, and the warmth inside him responded. It tightened its grip, drawing closer, pulsing with soft comfort. "They fear you," it whispered. "But I never will. I am proud of you. You are perfect, my child." Hale closed his eyes at night and let that voice cradle him like a blanket. But the turning point, the moment everything changed, came during a live fire exercise. A stray lost bolt grazed Hale's cheek. It should have burned him. Should have scarred him. Instead, the wound sealed instantly, leaving only the faint scent of warm earth in the air. Every soldier saw it. Every soldier froze. One dropped his rifle. Another whispered, "Emperor, protect us." A third muttered, "He's not human anymore." Hale tried to say something, anything, to calm them, to reassure them, to convince them he was still the same man he'd always been. But the warmth inside him swelled at their fear, humming like a purring beast. It felt delighted. Something beneath his skin rippled faintly, as if his flesh were breathing. The commissar saw it. The missionary saw it. Everyone saw it. And for the first time, Hale realized he was no longer just being observed. He was being evaluated, not as a soldier, not as a human, but as a problem. That night, Hale sat alone on his bunk while the barracks buzzed with uneasy whispers. He stared at his hands, steady, unscarred, perfect, and wondered if everyone was right. Was he still human?